Hey everyone, a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 5, Episode 17, and another amazing guest to bring you today. For those who are actually watching this on video, you'll see this amazingly brightly coloured cap with Madeira flashed across the top. This was a gift from this guy, along with this beautiful country music mug. So he's up there, it's like top of the Christmas card list already. So he's managed to achieve that very, very quickly. But I'm delighted to be bringing you Hiren. Hiren is genuinely one of the warmest people I've ever met. And bearing in mind, for the first part of our relationship, we met online. That's a really difficult thing to achieve for a virtual space. But ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Hiren Panchal. Big round of applause. Woo!
Wow.
Hi.
Hi, Nick. Wow, indeed. Thank you so much. Really
very welcome.
Glad to be here and for that intro as well.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I think kind of, like I said, clapping virtually is massively kind of underestimated. And also bearing in mind we're recording this on a Friday morning, both having really busy kind of energetic weeks because we spent some of that together as well, that we've got to do something to keep the energy up, right?
Absolutely. And I'll Fridays, as I call them, is actually sort of a great day of the week because the weekend's near and everything is, you can see it coming forward. So no, absolutely.
Absolutely. Happy Fridays. Actually, this will be going out on a Monday, so that's kind of irrelevant to me saying happy Fridays. But as people know by now, I never edit this stuff. I just kind of talk and put it out there and see what happens. It's worked so far, so I'm not going to question the logic. But anyway, Hiren, that's about me, more about you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and where you're from.
Sure. Thank you all. You wanted to start, born in 76, great year.
So you're before me, actually, so we're around the same age.
Excellent. Born in India, actually, sort of in Nadia, Gujarat. So I am a sort of husband to tolerating wife and papa to 4 superhumans, all 6 and under. So if you want to work out the maths and the challenges that comes with.
We're all going to have a whip round to buy you a TV after this, so you got something else to do.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Outside of family life, I'm a qualified financial planner and founder of Wensons Financial, and as well as a certified financial coach and founder of Wensons Legacy. So that's me in a nutshell.
And part of the next gen community is where our kind of paths crossed, and we've had many people from the community on before. We've had kind of Adam and Dan and Rohan, and a lot of people that have kind of come on and shared that experience. One of the things they kind of all mentioned that they kind of fell into this space. I've not spoken to anybody yet who's actually done this by design. What was your experience of getting into this financial sector?
Do you know, I would probably say I've found experiences the opposite, where people have actually sort of either had family members who are either sort of advisors or something that they actually plan for. I actually, by design, went the path down actually sort of going to be a financial role because of the challenges I had faced with my own sort of financial journey, and then sort of wanting to almost learn about the system, how it works, to then play by the rules or so. So I think that was the bit where it was like by design. Yeah, no, you're right in terms of people falling in, but then there was never really any history of any financial planners or so in my family or greater family for that matter.
And where's home for you now, Hiren?
Where's home for me now? Well, I travel between Madeira, Portugal, the sort of advertising you're doing for the tourism board, right?
You're welcome.
Thank you. I call it our Madeira at the moment because it's one of those situations that we always plan to potentially sort of retire somewhere in a sunny area. Because being born in India, I actually also was only there till about 4, then moved to Kenya because my parents are originally from East Africa.
Oh, wow.
Dad from Kenya, mum from Uganda. So there was that natural journey. Sort of, they met when they were studying in India. They went to sort of do sort of further education, and that's how they got together. So there was always a draw back to Africa. So then moving to Africa and then living there till about sort of 11 before moving to the UK. And my childhood was mainly in the sort of outdoors in the sunshine. So wanting that for our own children. And so I think this is where I find myself in sort of sunny Madeira in Portugal, because my wife's Portuguese, her family's originally from there. So when she was pregnant, we tried a sort of an initial trial period, which was still in the extended trial period. and in Madeira. So I travel between Madeira and here, the UK. So it's I call two places home.
Portugal's an amazing place. I mean, we've only stayed in one place before, which is Alvor, a small kind of fishing village at the south of the Algarve.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful place, really, and a really nice kind of pace. I think it's the pace that was noticeable. The pace is very different to here.
It is, and I think Madeira is actually an island, so the pace is even slower than the mainland. Yeah, and because it's closer to sort of Africa, i.e., sort of Morocco and that side, you tend to find that there's probably about sort of 10 months of sunshine compared to sort of a quarter or so of it in the mainland. So my tan is there's a reason for the tan.
It is true to be said, as we record this on the 30th of September, I think this time, just a few weeks ago, I was kind of going swimming to cool down during the heat wave. And last night I had my slippers and dressing gown on. It is quite erratic, right?
Absolutely. And not having worn a jacket for most of part of about the last couple of months when I haven't been here. And then when I arrived, we met earlier in the week. At your sort of Forging People events, and I was surprised to even put a jacket on and let alone long trousers.
Exactly. You've alluded to kind of like a real kind of overview of kind of where you grew up, and what did life look like? It kind of as far back as you can remember. Kind of obviously you were 4 when you left India, but what was life like growing up? And tell us about that kind of in terms of education and sure. Upbringing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no. It was a very different when I see how my children are growing up compared to what we had. There was a very much of an outdoor life where I don't know whether it was also the generation at the time as well, or times when it was very sort of you'd left the home, you leave home in the morning, and the rules were you came back before it got dark, or the street lights came on, or something along those lines. So we were being in the like Kenya as well. I think I probably remember more of that than I do India because I was very young in sort of India, but I do remember going to school on like my grandfather had arranged for a horse and cart to sort of take us to school and back. So I remember always being on that with a couple of other kids. That was my sort of visual memory of going to school and back again. And then in Kenya, it was sort of walking alongside it because again, we lived in Mombasa, which is like an island. It's surrounded 3 sides by water. So you're sort of passing, I think the coast tends to draw me in effectively. So I remember sort of walking to school and back. So yeah, the life was very much you went to school, came home, and then left again. And because Kenya's on like so the equator, you wouldn't have getting dark till about late 10, 11 o'clock at night. So your day was a lot longer. You know, I'm surprised even though as we move to the winter months now where you leave work home when it's dark and you come home when it's dark, you never really see any sunshine. I'm sure that creates an impact.
Yeah, absolutely does. I mean, again, we've spoken very openly about things like mental health before, haven't we? And it's kind of that certainly has an impact going into these months we're going into now. So I guess what was education like for you in terms of in your teens, in terms of school, college, university, or not? Yeah,
no, absolutely. So it was school in Kenya, and I think it was very different actually because in the schooling system over there was sort of standards based, and it was also sort of led via your skills because you could very much be left behind in a class and you could have had a friend that maybe didn't do as well in the exams and they would have to repeat a year or so. Then I never really saw any of that when I came into the UK, and so I was actually a year behind my elder sister. Sorry, there's 3 of us. I've got an elder sister who's 2 years older, and a younger sister who's 10 years younger, and we always call her the afterthought, and she would throw pick a brains about it. But
I'm sure she loves that.
Of course she does. Of course she does. So I was a year behind my older sister in studying in Kenya, and then when we came to the UK, they did it by age of entry or so, and the month she was born. So now I found myself 2 years behind her in the schooling system, and in also the schooling system where in Kenya was like you stayed in the class, the teachers moved. Whilst here you move around in a big campus and you sort of get around. So it was very different, adapted to it, understood it. And I think it was different, but at the same time challenging and just finding myself in a different environment that age was. So that was around about sort of 5, 6. You know, it's definitely something that you, as kids, I find my younger son doing this now, sort of adapting to a new school where he's just started from, although a few friends have moved across with him. There are sort of challenges on being a big scary world out there. so to speak. Yeah.
And what was the reasoning behind coming to the UK?
Well, actually, it was Kenya was a colony of the UK, British sort of a colony. So father had a sort of almost I got quite a lot of times challenges with our passport, although British passport, they're a British protected person's passport. I never really knew the difference. There was still a red passport to everybody else's until I went on holiday, and I always used to get stopped on the other side because of needing a visa as opposed to the others who didn't, so to speak. Because they also didn't understand what a British protected person is. Like in most passports, it would say British citizen. Mine actually said British protected person. So it was a different sort of time. And that was his visas running out. They wouldn't renew it in Kenya because he had a British passport. They almost sort of forced him to leave. And at that age, I think my looking back, my parents, he was probably only about in his mid-30s or so, living with 3 kids to sort of a country unknown.
And whereabouts in the UK did you land?
Heathrow. So right in the heart of it. And we stayed in, I think the choices were as to where do we, you know what, there's actually quite I was talking about this with my parents recently. And although I knew that, because I was partially preparing for our discussions today in their journey, and also sort of understanding what my memory is and what actually happened, right? So we actually had to sell out everything in Kenya and almost like a yard sale, everything in the bulk with the house and everything included, to then move. And parents, when we were moving, I think it was on the 30th of December 1987. So this is in the Christmas period, a day before New Year's Eve. We have a young family who's just landed, and I think we landed around about sort of in an evening time, where at Terminal 2 at Heathrow. And along the journey, I think my father was trying to work out what to do, where the plans were. I think he had to sort of go around, and he hadn't exchanged money from his Kenya shillings to British pounds. He was trying to sort of get people on the plane to exchange. I think people didn't have, and only thing he could raise was £1.50 for a phone call. So that's all to his name while sort of landing. That's and then it is. That story just sort of resonated. I remember the bit, but when I found the details of it, it sort of broke things down a lot more. And then we ended up going to, at that time, I think it's probably still going to be called the Queen's Building. This is where all sort of people who don't have nowhere to go or so get directed to. So it was my mum and 2 sisters. My younger sister was only 1 at the time. And sort of were left with the luggage. Me and my father went to this building to try and find out, well, what do we do next? Now we're here, right? Found out, okay, choose a borough. Well, you're in the borough of Hillingdon, not knowing where and what we need to know. Well, that's going to be our home. Then we know that because we've landed there, so to speak. And then because of the time frames during Christmas, because of the New Year's time and everything, all the most sort of places were closed. So I remember that they actually sort of feeling sorry for this young family, and the staff that were there did like a whole whip round. And my parents remember, because only a couple of days ago, my dad actually told me the amount. He raised £37 to add to his 150 to take us through the weekend up until Monday, Tuesday after New Year's, when offices were reopened again.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very much insightful, and also sort of putting things into context, because I look back and think, well, how old was he? He was 10 years younger than I am now, with 3 young children, and sort of no plan effectively. And the plan was being made as he went along. So that was quite a sort of a revelation, I would say. So so that's how we ended up in Hillingdon, being in the area we are. And then the first home, we like to call, was in a hostel, sort of a home where they put homeless or people without a residence, and sort of stayed there for a few months. So our start was 1988, because we saw the fireworks coming right the next day on that television that I may probably need to buy again, as you said. and that was our start into life in the UK. It was quite a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And did they find kind of work quite quickly, or did it take settle in?
It was a struggle, I believe. I think he was always an entrepreneur. He always worked for himself. So going into a job role, I think he assumed he would get into a sort of a fireman role or so, because his business was selling fire equipment back in Kent, bits he had to sell off. So he thought he had that sort of background, but unfortunately, his age and also the non-relevant training within that sort of hampered those. So he very much sort of they found their way by sort of being entrepreneurial, and I think the starting point was running canteens in a school, our school. Yeah, so the student culture. So I think that.
And speaking of which, so your education, you settled into, that would have been secondary school by that point, right?
It was.
Yeah. And so how did life kind of go from there? Did you go on to further education?
I did. Went from there to a college after sort of 6 of. In hindsight, I may have actually decided to stay on school to do my sort of further A levels, should I say? Because again, there was that part about I didn't do so as planned after my first year, and I decided to move with the fear of, well, I'll restart again and wipe that slate clean, being sort of a bit of a perfectionist or so forth. But in hindsight, that was not a great move, because I'm now having to settle into somewhere new. I don't know anybody or so forth, and sort of led me to be further behind than I would have been if I had stayed in place. And then that moving, so I went to university on a sort of a higher national diploma level. But again, I was young and maybe misdirected and easily influenced. So I didn't complete and didn't have the qualifications I tried for.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It is. And then that was the bit that sort of highlighted it more so, where that journey that you have and the influences that it created, because of going from a student that was with great potential to then sort of go into all these various influences as sort of teenage life kicked in and sort of university life and the independence that brought in itself and the responsibilities. I think that sort of, I went a bit wilder than I should have done, should we say.
Hand on heart. I'm with you. I think that's the thing, that especially when we replay should we say, the things that turn out to be negative or perceived kind of bad things, that I think that the more we think about something, we'll never remember something 100% in its entirety, will we? So we end up kind of beating ourselves up even more if we're not feeling good about that choice or decision or situation now. And I think that's a real problem with kind of hindsight and looking back and stuff. You get that rumination going on, don't you? It's that constantly replaying things, but you replay them with a very, very current sense of kind of guilt or anxiety or regret. And it's just not the case, I guess. And it's an interesting one.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that there is that negative bias that sort of tends to sort of draw up on sort of, and this is where sort of all the benefits. But when you then think about your own story, there's that positive bias, because you tend to eliminate the bits that created pain, and remember, you just paint a rosier picture than it probably was. And then if you fill in the details, then well, actually, you know what? It wasn't that great.
I mean, we're going to get on a really dodgy path here, but so I'm going to tread a bit carefully. But I think you're quite right when it comes to like going back to partners, going back to jobs, that kind of stuff, that you kind of always, the further you come away, it's like the opposite to your own stuff. You kind of think you only remember the good stuff. Oh, that'd be really good. You think, actually, no, now I know why I left this situation in the first place. So, and again, I'm going to leave it there.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll say this is the part where, as much as I look back at it, okay, I've gone into university, there was a little element of also sort of shame and stuff when you look at it. Sort of, if I look in the industry, I mean, it's quite a sort of academically advanced. People feel like, so as a financial planner, so I should be sort of great at math. In fact, there's a misconception. I'm really not. The team behind me are great at that, not myself personally. I think it's that sort of part of bits that I think bring into relevance. And I think, again, that was further highlighted at university when sort of things like student grants and money was thrown at me with sort of banking institutions with allowing me overdrafts and loans and whatever. And then being resourceful as I was, and found out that actually I only needed one of my grant checks in a particular institution. I got 3 of those in a term, and I could open 3 different institutions. So now my credit is 3 times over than what I should have been allowed. And that in itself then creates the challenges and where that path it took me, so to speak. So
how did your kind of professional career, that step out into, I'm guessing employment, or I'm guessing you didn't go straight into kind of self-employment or ownership. So from your professional path from leaving university to the door of Wensons and creation and foundation of Wensons.
Yeah.
What was that bit in between look like? How did your journey play out career wise?
Oh, I've had a very varied roles. It potentially started from even whilst at school, because I used to have a sort of a weekend job in a sports shop, which was led on from a work experience, a 3-week work experience. And I managed to get there before the manager did every morning. I was there around 8 o'clock. She started around 8. The store opened around 8:30, or she would get there 8:30, always see me there before. So that dedication encouraged her to say, well, look, you know what, when this finishes, I'd be happy for you to have a Saturday job or so. Now, from the background that I had with family and stuff, where I did sort of newspaper rounds and stuff to create our own money, where I didn't have to then justify how I spent it. Was what I got used to. And because knowing parents' circumstances, and they didn't have the money to give us pocket money or anything along those bases, we were resourceful in creating our own avenues, income streams or so. So I think that was the beginning of that journey in the sort of the working world, if you want to call it that. And then from there, when I sort of came back home from university, there was an opportunity with parents had a sports club. They ran the bar and the catering facilities in a grassroots club, something like where they do the football, the tennis and hockey and so forth. So I worked behind the bar, and sort of I was young at the time, but it didn't matter because it was a private members club, so I didn't have to be 18.
Yeah.
So it was in a closed sort of secure environment. It was nobody could walk off the street. It had to be a member to be there. So it was a private members club.
Yeah.
So that, and then the businesses that my parents, my dad had, the entrepreneurial side would sort of help him. So that's where that journey created in showing me the entrepreneurial side of things. But whilst that was happening, obviously he couldn't afford to pay me what I needed to be able to live the lifestyle I wanted to at the time. So I went into jobs. I've worked in sort of telecoms. I've worked in IT. I've worked in generally in a sales role. I've always been involved with talking to people.
So always kind of client facing. Interesting. We got a shared commonality that I never knew we had. So a kind of pub and club management was kind of part of my history as well.
Right.
And the bar work thing, just in between kind of roles or to support roles and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It does not surprise me. You would be one of the best barmen ever, because very easy to talk to, very kind of, I always find you kind of, I smile when I talk to you, because I think you're a very naturally motivating and inspirational person. You give a great vibe off of you. I can imagine people used to tell you their problems quite a bit.
Do you know what? Thank you for that kind words. And you're probably right. I think maybe even at a young age, I probably worked out, because if you're in a bar serving and there was only one individual, so let's say I would normally be talking to a parent of a child who's doing some coaching or so. So they've come to drop them off and they're sitting down having a pint. The more I engaged with them, they're standing at the bar buying another drink or a third drink. So and they also needed that time to just themselves and somebody to talk to. So I find myself
the barman is an unofficial counselor. I think it's got to be said. But I think also in terms of forging you for the client-facing world that you went into, and completely by accident, not by design, like with me, that actually being able to see the best and actually often sometimes the worst of people actually forges you to kind of have better client-facing engagements, doesn't it? And you understand the dynamics of people engagement. And I think that's crucial. And bar work is massively underrated when it comes to that.
No, I 100% agree with you, actually, Nick, because I think the skills that it builds in terms of, even personally, I was, and still probably am, an introvert, you know, at heart as such. But when I put on a hat, pardon the pun, I get into a role effectively, and that then gives that confidence that I can be in that sort of, be it I'm a planner, be it I'm a barman, be it sort of in whatever that role. Then it gives me, I suppose, purpose, if you want to call it that. Then it gives me the conduit to how I can then bring my confidence out. Yeah, you know. I think that's how it sort of led belief. So yeah, no, absolutely. Built some great skills in being able to have those one-to-one conversations with individuals. being able to actually see the narratives or even read body language. I think that was the big thing. I've sometimes been told I've got sort of very big eyes that sort of quite intimidating as well. So I'm conscious of sort of almost squinting when I talk to some people. So
I've never found you intimidating, and I've met you in person, so I can guarantee to anybody listening or watching you're not intimidating. But I just think it's fascinating that I mean, you know, my definition of being an introvert is you recharge in your own company. An extrovert recharges in the company of others. So for me, if this week, for example, that I lectured for the first time at a college, I had the Find Your Voice event with you on Wednesday, and then I was working in a prison yesterday, all for different reasons, a lot of energy and a lot of people around you. Actually kind of working from home today and kind of recording this, or you having a nice chat with somebody, this is recharging me. I need this kind of alone time to recharge, even though I love what I do and love being around people. So are you truly being heard in life and in business? And think about that genuinely. If the answer to that is no, then you've found the right event. If you want to give yourself that boost personally and professionally, come along to Find Your Voice Live. This will change your life. This will be the game changer that you've been looking for.
It provides me with the confidence in myself to prove to myself that I can do it, I can get up on stage, I can speak.
There's absolutely nothing to be nervous about with these events. It's very, very open, very, very relaxed.
Help my confidence go from here at the beginning of the day to here at the end of the day.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health and a transformational speaking coach. I'm the founder of Forging People, and Find Your Voice Live is our flagship event where we cross the boundaries of personal development, mental health, transformation, and public speaking. Your ability to speak, to deliver any message to any audience with clarity and power and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success by your own definition of that really subjective term. Speaking is life, speaking is business, speaking is education, and that's the thing that we focus on most. What I find is that people are here for many, many different reasons. Some people do absolutely want to be a stage speaker or a professional speaker. Some people want to be able to represent their business or to lead a team or inspire a movement or create a story. But even actually, some people want to be here just because they want to be heard at home. Maybe they don't feel their opinions being heard, that they can't say yes to the things they want to say yes to or no to the things they want to say no to. Again, this is where personal development meets mental health, meets public speaking to create a real positive impact. At the end of Find Your Voice Live, you will walk away with massive confidence around delivering your message. The ability to stand up and deliver means you will enhance your self-esteem in an amazing way. You will also have the skills and tools and tips and techniques to not only deliver a presentation, but to structure a presentation, to find your audience, to be able to deliver emotional storytelling to help your audience feel and make them want to be part of your tribe, make them want to be part of your following, and really tune into what you're truly about, to truly make yourself heard in life and in business. If you're sat on the fence, if you're still not sure, take the model that I use, say yes, worry about it later, and I'll make sure that you're looked after brilliantly. Myself and my team will make sure that you have an amazing day, transformational day that will have the desired positive impact that you want to achieve. How do you find your energy is nourished or depleted by people? Do you find that you need more alone time, or actually do you recharge around people?
It's a great question to a father of four, Nick. Time, where do I find the time? And that's probably where we're more conscious of it. Me and my wife kind of sort of I feel partially sort of more aware in her circumstances, because at least when I do sort of travel in for work or so, when I'm in the UK, it gives me time to recharge, although my weeks and days are a lot busier with sort of work related stuff. That sort of the randomness of the children, because for example, we could have had a plan for a day, and we've had this only most recently, about a couple of weeks ago, and my son contacted COVID. So the plan was he was also going to school in the morning. He started big school. We would have a diary from 8:30 till 4:30 that I could do things in. But now he's at home. And that then spread to my 3 other children. So now they're all at home. So my diary of various things that were supposed to have happened has to flip. You have to sort of, that work-life balance. If anybody says that they've found it, I don't call them a liar.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, work-life balance is a myth, because I think that everyone likes to do things in their own time. And some people, as you know, with that kind of entrepreneurial mindset, that actually a lot of people like working on an evenings and just taking a nap in the afternoon or jumping on the PlayStation, or it doesn't have to be a 9 to 5 kind of mindset to be a work-life balance.
No, absolutely. You're right. And I have a sort of a caveat that I put on the bottom of my emails at times, depending on the time I send an email out. Because if it's in the daytime, then obviously I know that people will be working or so. So like because my routine can be very much that I'll make myself available for potentially, say, school runs or any sort of chores or appointments that we have to do with the children. And I'll come back to it maybe later in the evening or early hours of the night when they've woken me up and I can't go back to sleep or so. So that caveat is effectively saying along the lines that this is a good time for me to send it because it suits me, and we encourage that flexible working. But I would kindly appreciate if you don't read it or respond to it until it's your time to do so.
Yeah.
You know, and again, sort of trying to sort of ensure that the boundary is there for them and they don't have to respond to me just because I've sent them an email at 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. so I think...
Tell us about Wensons. So first of all, is Wensons a name that you inherited or a name that you created? And if you did create it, where did it come from?
Yeah, no, thank you. I don't think I've ever been asked that. And it's a great question because it is a name that we created. And it was a name that it was in a different spelling that one of the businesses that my father had way back in India, which was Wensons, which was VENSONS or something along those lines. But Wensons was effectively the sports club my parents had. My mum, her name's Vandana. They shortened that to be able for people to say it as Wen, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
my dad had it. My dad had a even super cool one. It was his name is Hiren S Panchal. They shortened that somehow to Punch. And I thought that, and I was Little Punch or Punch Junior, so not as painful as Big Punch.
Cool.
So, and then when I decided that the names also came wrong, so sort of hashing from that Wen part, it was when I was my mum, and my elder sister's name is Sonal. So one of the sons is Sonal and the other son is me. So there was only 2 of us before my younger sister who came along. So that's where Wen Sons, so Wen's sons, if you want to call it in that way. So me being it might have been just something particular to me, but that's the story that it came on. And funny enough,
it's really, really cool.
It was easy to trademark and copyright because obviously it's not out there.
Absolutely. And
so that was a good.
And it's so you is just a personal investment in the brand, and the fact that it's kind of hidden in plain sight is even better. Actually, I like that. I really do.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad I asked that question, really, because it didn't strike me as anything. Usually when you see kind of company names or brand names, you kind of work out whether it comes from a phrase or a quote or something personal to their name. But I just couldn't work it out. So I thought I always go on the principle, if I don't understand something, I'm going to ask. I don't mind appearing dumb in public, and I do it all the time. So
that's a great principle to live by, actually.
Exactly.
You know, and also, it's I think it sounds quite sort of generic. And I think there was also the whole bit about when I look at businesses by sort of family members or sort of in the sort of the sort of ethnic backgrounds, they tend to have businesses that actually had English sounding names. Smith and something, but there was nobody that had that name in the business. It was just because it was something that was more going to be acceptable as a business name or along those lines. Yeah. So, but then seeing Wensons, although I had that core in it, but even just the sound of it didn't really seem like it was any particular sort of agenda or anything around that film. Right? So I quite like to sort of revive that, should we say?
The financial planning industry, as I've said before to the next gen guest, it's certainly been shaken up by these kind of cultural changes that organizations like NextGen and people like yourself are kind of putting in place, and being able to, I guess, has always been like the last bastion of traditional business, where it's kind of traditionally suited, booted, predominantly kind of male, certain age, white, kind of mentality and approach. And there certainly is a culture change running through financial services generally. How have you found that kind of change from the day you started to the day we're talking today?
Oh, I believe we've sort of definitely come away sort of leaps and bounds, because I started my career after the sort of all the various industry experiences I had, which I'm very grateful for, because it gave me great commercial awareness on sort of like various of how that product on our table sort of ends up and how it's being monetized, where the income comes from. So it actually started in being self-employed in insurance sales. I know there's a stigma around sort of the insurance salesman and all sort of elements of where that's where that history came in from. And then sort of understanding that actually when I went to see a client and forged relationships and sort of created the rapport, that they were sort of trusting me with other parts of their financial affairs and wanting advice on that, not just their sort of protection, which covered the sort of the legacy part. And so, and if the worst happened, how are their well-loved ones taken care of? Then it was, well, actually, we now also have some money here. Is this good? So and then the sort of awareness of how these things were sold to them, where they would not have been right for them, simply to sort of maybe appease some sales targets by the sales individual or something like that, and they were not right, got me deeper into understanding more around finance. And at that point, within the sort of the insurance sales, or so, majority of the sort of people, the worker bees, if you want to call it that, I looked around, were of like the BAME origin as such. You know, we were the ones, not the door knockers, as effectively you want to call it that, and just to go and sort of talk to people about it. As I progressed in that journey and then sort of doing well and then leading teams, so I was a regional lead for the businesses. So I had almost at one stage about 30 individuals who I was managing their sort of journey through the employment. So I actually found the ethnicity of the sort of individuals change. Now, this is more akin to what you were talking about earlier, sort of the white, middle-aged, pinstripe sort of individuals or so, and that sort of change. So although I found myself in the same room, I did find that there was an element of having to conform, so not really be myself, because do I fit here? I find myself in this room or at the table, but not really having a voice back then. It was more effectively an echo of the voices I'm hearing. Yeah, or the things you're saying. So you almost sort of spoke a certain way, you did it, and I think it was generally just sort of, if I don't want to create any ripples, should we say. I've got here, now how do I continue my journey and get better at it? And then I found that there was a lot of it that it didn't sit well with me personally. I think there was also that part about I could have continued my journey in those institutions and working my way up to it. And then I was talking at the same time to individuals behind the bar, because I used to also work behind in the evenings and the weekends, who worked for the likes of Barclays and Lloyds, and so who used to come and play football on a weekend, and now so just picking their brains. Look, I'm looking at getting into the financial services industry. What would you recommend? And these guys are in their 50s and 60s who are just leaving a career, having worked at banks from either being a cashier to now a director or something like that, and have now going on to setting up their own financial planning practices or so. And they said, well, I wish we did this sooner. You know, we have a better, we're not having the red tape. We can do what we're, so I'm picking on this sort of general theme of they all say they wish they did it sooner. So why am I going to go and play that same path that they did? Yes, it was harder because you're not having an employed role. I had to be self-employed, starting from zero, you know, and then sort of working my way up. But I think it's been a great experience. And I had the comfort of, the support from family. I'm living at home. I had the sort of ability to sort of have my exams done and the focus. So I think that was the sort of the starting point of going about starting my career within financial services.
And how did you find your first kind of few clients? Because we know there's a snowball effect when you do get those clients in place, but those initial clients, I think that's the toughest part for people just starting out under their own steam, doing anything, isn't it? How did you find your first clients?
Well, the thing is, going back to that sort of insurance sales, I think if you were ever a part of any sales cohorts or so back then, the masterclass started off with your Hot 100. Which were your
training,
which were your friends, your family, and all those. And then the tricks to sort of get them into the diary was, I'm in the area next Tuesday or Thursday. When would you want to see me? When is better for you, sort of thing. And because they were friends and family, they didn't want to be rude. They'll felt sorry and say, okay, come in and see me. So having those individuals,
peer pressure rocks.
Exactly. So having those individuals that I actually then had in my sort of client base for insurance, because we have building trusting and longer sort of relationships, because one of the things that I was quite proud of in that thing, that persistency levels were sort of the highest in the sort of branch. This is how I accelerated. It was 99 point sort of something %.
Wow.
Things that I put in place were not falling off the books, because this was not sold. This was actually a need, and individuals needed, and they continued no matter what the markets were doing. They would continue paying their premium because they know the benefits of what they were putting in place. So those individuals were now trusting me with more of their financial affairs. So when I qualified, it was natural to revisit those individuals and sort of then help more than what I'm sort of doing. So it triggered on from there. Fortunate enough that majority of clients and stuff that I've built the business of are organic growth, are recommendations from existing and sort of individuals. So that's been the main sort of growth strategy. I always sort of would then say that revisiting people you already know, relationships you already have, is always a great place, because people know you. You're building trust, and if they can trust you already as that, then that's the sort of a great starting place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I genuinely, for people kind of watching and listening to this now, I'm not saying this because Hiren's on the call right now. Hiren struck me right from the first time I saw his little face on a Zoom call back a couple of years ago during lockdown, that one of the warmest guys. And since then, actually, what you see online is actually what you see offline as well, which is always reassuring, to be fair. As somebody who is obviously tries to be positive and kind of motivating and a warm kind of support for your network and the people around you, how do you deal with toxicity or hardship? What kind of recharges your battery, to use a terminology that I use?
Yeah, no, it is hard, because it's hard to be sort of being positive sort of 24 hours a day, and it's don't think it's possible, you know. And I think generally speaking, just the what life chucks at you within that family life, and then the sort of the professional life, or so you have to learn to cope with. And I think the parts of recharge, I love sort of music. Music is a great part of that ability. I remember where that also stems from. When I used to fall asleep at night time, I used to have sort of the radio on. It used to be a big ghetto blaster that was next to my pillow, which I picked up at a charity shop. And I always remember that I would fall asleep with, I think it was something, I forget what the actual show was called, but it was like people would send in their 3 love songs to play. And every night, I don't know.
I remember stuff like that. Yeah.
So, and then they would play.
Love. It was like Late Night Love or something, wasn't it? It was
something along those lines. So I would fall asleep to this music that I would, and then my parents would always come up and switch off the radio. At times, I'm aware they're switching it off, and I'll say, no, I'm still awake, and they'll leave it. So
there was I'm not sure if you remember, there was an alternative name that was used in the mainstream Urban Dictionary for that section. It was called the erection section. AKA
I wasn't aware, but thank you for giving me that visual.
You are welcome.
So it then sort of engraved in me that subconsciously they had all these sort of music that really old, like 70s, 80s playing, that were playing on these sort of old radio stations that I still today, I hear music and I go, I know that somehow, or I know it why, because it's sitting in my filing cabinet somewhere. So music was a great way. It brings up different moods depending on what's going on. It was a great recharge. And then I also tried to cook. So I think that was the other part, sort of having music, cooking. And I do love a good road journey. So that's the part then when we came the other day, I thought the commute was a great place. I got to do 2 of my favorite things, driving and listening to music.
Amazing.
So I think that was a great recharge. So that's what I try for. And I think my kids are getting the music bug as well. So it is.
So I guess the elephant in the financial room like right now, obviously, is the cost of living crisis and the economy being what it is, and it's not going away anywhere anytime soon. This is obviously a very big question, but I guess from your perspective, is there some form of kind of wisdom or advice or insight that you can offer to people listening now in all different situations, different budgets, different everything? What would you say people could do right now? The one thing that can make most impact for people right now?
I believe finding your filter is sort of a good place to start, and this sort of stems in from the news. Yeah, because in 2022, the sources that comes at you, i.e. sort of newspapers, the headlines, online, podcast streams, even sort of all the various articles that are shared by friends and family that it hits you at. I think news publications also, they're built to sell to their audiences, right? So a big headline.
Sex and fear, isn't it? That's the two things that sell.
It is, absolutely. So that noise that it's created, I think finding the it's harder to do because it's easier to find bad news or attach to or watch it than it is to find good news. And whilst this is going on, and we had this during the pandemic when we were running both ourselves with the sort of morning commute with the next gen community, that my section around sort of finding that sort of 5 minutes of good news stories globally, what it actually did for me, subconsciously or indirectly, actually helped me a lot through that pandemic because I'm having to go and actively look for positive news stories. Right, I'm not being sat in front of just the news, but it's throwing me all the negative stories. I'm having to look for stuff such as the positive networks, the sort of all the various good news networks, all these where I'm reading stories that are genuinely filling me with sort of hope and sort of the good news and tears of joy and stuff. But I'm reading 10, 15, 20 stories to then only pick 2 or 3 because of the time constraints, right? But I've already had that impact of those 10, 15 stories. And now I am talking to other people when I hear stories. I'll tell my wife, I'll tell my friends. And then there's almost like that emotional Wi-Fi that goes on where,
I love that's a great expression.
Where you're now sharing good news. And because you care and you bring a positivity, they're sort of bringing that into themselves and they may share that on board as well. So I found that filtering out, I don't think I've actually watched the news. Yes, I do. In the profession I am, I get the headlines. I have to sort of be certainly aware of what's going on and so, but I don't physically go out to watch the sort of the 6 o'clock news or the 9 o'clock news or anything like that on a daily basis because I know it creates a wrong mindset because of that negativity that's there. So I would say in terms of advice, potentially sort of filtering out, finding your filter, because everybody's individual. Where is that bit where it sort of tends to be, where it's pushing you over the anxiety or so? And then also remembering that we have been here before. It's not the first time. It's just that news that it's coming at you a lot different and in a lot more ways than it potentially did in the 90s or the 70s when it sort of happened then as well, right? People have lived through these without the actual sort of the cost. And some of these elements are also fueled by other world events, like the war in Ukraine, that's creating a temporary sort of cost of living crisis additions. So I think understanding and putting it into context in the greater scheme of things probably may help individuals to try and sort of filter out or actually also understand and avoid the noise, so to speak, as long as they've looked after or they understand the investment time horizon, they understand what we're doing and what specifics. And this is where that individual knowing your clients or getting to have those conversations with your planners and your advisors, so they know what you're trying to achieve, will help them sort of ensure that they keep you calm and sort of continue without making rash decisions.
I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but it'd be the longest podcast ever. So for the sake of everybody else, they don't want to hear me for 3 hours. So for the sake of everybody else, I'm going to have to bring this episode to a close. But however, I'd love to get you back on for a future season. I think you've been a fantastic guest. So before I let you go and release you back into the wilds of Hillingdon, if I were announcing you to the stage, now I know this because we did this week, but pretend I don't know and tell everybody else. If I were announcing you to the stage and now the MC of the O2 Arena, 20,000 people have paid our hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing. You're sat back in the green room, you hear me call your name, and your walk-on music kicks in. That song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state to perform. What would your walk-on music be, Hiren?
I'm going to pretend I've heard this for the first time this week. But I think it's a great question, because I think that sort of the power that actually has and the mind frame there is it was very hard to choose one potential sort of song or so, but I know one that's actually resonated with me, because I think I went through moments in time when I watched all the Wensons as a collective or so. I think they were my first movies or so. So I think it has to be the good, the bad, and the ugly theme tune.
That's a great choice. It's proper moody as well. I like that. It's really cool.
And especially the version by the Danish National Symphony Orchestra. These guys are absolutely fantastic. They've done quite a few, I think, but if you look that up in sort of YouTube or search online and actually look at that version, it's great, because it actually also encompasses all the things that I go through at various times of the day, which is I have my good, I have my bad, and I have my ugly.
Absolutely.
So I think
along with everybody else's choices from season 5 will be available on the playlist at the end of the season. But for now, a big thank you for your time. Hiren Panchal. Woo!
Thank you very much, Nick.
An amazing
pleasure
guest.
To be here.
Thank you very much for being with us. To everybody else, I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. Again, big thanks to Hiren. Stay tuned for next Monday's episode. Hit like, subscribe, and all that jazz. Whatever's going to take you to keep coming back. I have an amazing guest to bring you next time out as well. So stay tuned, and I'll see you then. Take care, be well, stay happy. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye.